We drum in that messaging around the dangers of COVID pretty diligently for a full 2-week period of sustained propaganda.
Announcement. COVID-19 announcement.
I don't see like this as two different classes of people. If you're vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated, you have all these rights. If you are vaccinated...
That is what it is, so yep.
I'm Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, and this is COVID-19 announcement.
Reminded of a saying which I'm unfortunately going to have to paraphrase because I can't remember who said it, but it was something along the lines of, historically, the world's greatest atrocities, they've always been committed by people who were totally and utterly convinced that they were the good guys, that they were 100% morally superior, that they were in the right side of history. And they never stopped to question if this was actually true.
No jab, no treatment.
Yeah, sorry Mel, we're still just recovering from that weather forecast. That is looking very, very grim again for Auckland. Kia ora, have a neat weekend yourself. Yeah, healthcare systems around the world right now are still totally overwhelmed by people who are sick with COVID. And most of those people going to hospital are unvaccinated. So some countries are now making it harder, making it more expensive for the unvaccinated to get healthcare. Tonight we're asking if that could happen here.
We drum in that messaging around the dangers of COVID pretty diligently for a full 2-week period of sustained propaganda.
Welcome along to the project. So that's a bit of a look around the world, and you know, if you've been feeling these last few weeks like New Zealand is the only place where they've got this sort of two-class system, of some people have called it, treating one group of people different from the others. Now it's happening in every country around the world, and in some cases the unvaccinated being treated much, much harsher.
That is what it is, so yep.
Simon, today the Ministry of Health added another death to its COVID-19 recording. A man named Robert Hart sustained serious gunshot injuries outside a Newland motel last week, and he died despite first aid attempts. Now, since his death, health authorities say he tested positive for COVID-19.
The meme comes true again.
So then you have to ask how someone who sustained these types of injuries and then died ends up as part of our COVID-19 death tally. Now, the Ministry of Health says that's because under the World Health Organization guidelines, anyone who dies while also having an acute COVID-19 infection is recorded as part of a nation's death tally, whatever the cause of death might be.
The New Zealand Herald reports family grieving an Auckland father shot and killed in a Newland driveway face further devastation. He has since tested positive for COVID-19. Yeah, I think the fact that he's been shot dead is pretty devastating enough. But in all seriousness, because Hart tested positive for COVID after he was pronounced dead, authorities are now preventing his family from giving him a funeral. Health authorities may test a deceased person for COVID-19 if their cause of death is not clear. If their cause of death is not clear, he was gunned down on the street. Must be another COVID death then. Let's not forget, entire countries have been put under lockdown in response to one COVID case. Meanwhile, the Queensland president of the Australian Medical Association says that Aussies who refuse the jab will be unemployable, miserable and lonely for life.
Oh, they're crazy not to get vaccinated. Life will be miserable without being vaccinated. You won't be able to hide. It's going to be very hard to maintain your employment if you're not vaccinated. You won't be able to go anywhere for any entertainment. So get vaccinated, otherwise you're going to have a very, very lonely life and you're not going to be able to maintain your employment.
But it's not mandatory.
You're making an assumption that the only people who want to be vaccinated are Aucklanders. We want everyone to be vaccinated who may not have, for whatever reasons, reached the decision to be vaccinated. That is the area we have to work hard on over the coming weeks and months.
Hey yo, it's 2 shots for summer fam. 2 shots delivered free.
Messaging, as you say, is important. That's what we've been talking about. Can I just ask you about sort of tweets by other political parties, one by National MP Simon O'Connor, who put out a tweet showing himself as a puppet.
2 for long days and warm nights. Yeah, 2 shots is the key.
It is extremely unhelpful, and since a year ago, the Prime Minister, Dr Bloomfield, and Minister Hipkins have made it quite clear that we must look to one source of truth, and that's why we promote the daily briefings from here in Wellington.
2 shots together, whānau. Yes, sir. 2 shots to share a feed. 2 shots to have a sing-along. Even 2 to do the...
But also the information pages through websites and clear messaging through our providers in the community so that they can communicate that to families. The kind of noise that you might see on the fringe from opposition parties is certainly not helpful. We must look to one source of truth.
See, somebody sent me an email, a video actually last Friday, and it had you talking at the Socialist Union International, whatever it was called.
Yes.
And you mentioned the word comrade about 4 times in a minute. What was that about?
It was a rally, and I would have been about 25 years old, and it probably would have been in Hungary.
It was in 2009.
It would have been in Hungary, was it, or was it in...
It was in 2009.
Oh, well, I can't remember which country it was in.
Comrades, the second thing, comrades, and our LGBT comrades,
It's when your jokes start to manifest into reality, where
as we leave this place, comrades, it was you together as comrades. Comrades, I want to invite the comrades, we have... Viva UC Viva! Viva UC Viva!
Which country it was
Do you
in.
think you've changed since those days?
No, not particularly.
collective comrade.
If you are including all of those groups that are protected under Section 21 of the Human Rights Act, as you say, political opinion is protected. So if I write an opinion piece that says Jacinda Ardern is a communist or a dictator, could I be stung for hate speech?
Well, let's not use that. Let's use something else theoretical.
Jacinda Ardern is a communist or a dictator.
Use something else theoretical.
Shots for the B-Changs. 2 shots for the Mish. 2 to Manu off the wharf.
Watching for some days, and this is not unique to New Zealand, that in the midst of what is a global issue, as you would expect, there are a number of rumours that circulate. I am present on social media, I see it myself. I cannot go around and individually dismiss every single rumour I see on social media, as tempted as I might be. So instead I want...
Jacinda Ardern is a communist or a dictator. Could I be stung for hate speech?
Well, let's not use that. Let's use something else theoretical.
We will share with you the most up-to-date information daily. You can trust us as a source of that information.
2 shots for skinny dips. 2 shots to hit the festivals. 2 to get up front.
I aim to be constantly hearing about how so awesome it was and we cruised through it, or sweet as. It's cruel. You're sadists.
We have a society at the moment which is very fearful, much more distress. I don't know how much money's been set aside for mental health this year. The budget does not break it down that far.
We're asking you to imagine if you lived in a country where you had to cover your face when you went outside, if you couldn't go to school, if you couldn't go to work, if the government tightly controlled every aspect of your life, if everyone followed in blind obedience, if you had a restriction on where you could travel and very limited rights.
And what I'd say is that we're all actually completely on the same page when it comes to driving vaccinations and making sure that we're doing everything that we can to reach people that we need to. This is an issue of... This is an issue...
Not working in Israel.
Sir, I'm going to answer the questions of the accredited media.
Has the Prime Minister only just realised that there are new variants of COVID? And if not, why is she so unprepared for them?
Mr. Speaker, do I even have to answer that? Sir, I will shut down the press conference if you do not cease. Sorry, to our accredited members of the gallery here, we might move to an inside venue. Unfortunately, we've got someone who's disrupting your press conference today, so we might reconvene.
Mr. Peterson, what's the story?
But you know, one of the things that I picked up in the States was the emphasis on testing. So here the emphasis on vaccination, but in California, they're about 60% vaccinated, but I felt safer in California than I feel here in Auckland. And I think it's because of the level of fear that has been created around COVID. And there are ways to deal with it. Vaccination is one of them, but the one that gets very little talk is testing. Up there, I tested 7 times in 8 days. I was tested every time I went into a building. I tested, you could buy tests over the counter and do it at the hotel. And I think, you know, one of the things that's really getting to me and breaking my heart really is the whole vaxxer, anti-vax situation. Now, you know, I have no time for Brian Tamaki and, you know, his life. But this is turning into a really divisive issue in New Zealand. The idea that teachers can't teach because they've chosen not to vaccinate is really going to start splitting us. And there is an answer, and it's testing. The reason you have vaccination is to prevent the worst cases of COVID. The reason you have testing is to ensure you don't have it. So every time I went to a business, Fox, MLB, I was tested before I went in just to ensure I didn't have it. So we could do that with school teachers. You know, it should be on Farm Act. Being able to test like they do in America, you go to a chemist shop, you buy the test over the counter, and you test to prove that you haven't got it. And that's something that Farm Act should pick up, and testing should be freely available to everyone, and we could move away from this really damaging fight that is vax and anti-vax.
Yeah.
I bet you didn't expect me to talk about that.
No, I didn't quite. The idea was MIQ, but I appreciate where you're coming from. But vaccination, of course, is our best defence, I think, in terms of beating this thing and making sure that the most vulnerable in our population are safe and secure.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, one of the things we latched onto a few things in the panic. So the very first thing we did was we talked about saving lives. Right at day one, we should have talked about saving lives and livelihoods. When we talked about essential businesses, we should have come from the point that every business is essential. Now, let's figure out how we keep most businesses running. Instead, we came from a different angle that said only these ones are essential, the rest of you shut down. So if we thought about saving lives and livelihoods, we'd have a different approach. If we thought about vaccination and testing, testing is really at the core of ensuring that people aren't moving around the community. You know, so in New Zealand, you're going to have to be vaccinated to fly. So we're going to hear horrible stories of people who can't get to a funeral, who can't get home to a parent who's sick or dying. Why? Because they've chosen not to be vaccinated. That's their choice. Everyone in our company is vaccinated. I'm a huge supporter of it. But let's not divide the country. Let's look at other solutions. And testing is a really good one.
Yeah, I will jump in and just remind people that you actually can fly domestically if you get a negative pre-departure COVID test. So there are ways of travelling
is that right?
without a vaccination. But you can understand where the fear... Look, I appreciate where you're coming from, but you can understand where the fear is coming from. And you talk about Los Angeles, where you've come from. I was looking up the stats this morning. They've had 1.5 million cases of COVID-19 and close to 27,000 deaths. We've had 33 deaths, Sir Ian. So you can appreciate why people would want to stick the course and continue the path that we've chosen to go down.
Well, you know, again, you know, I guess one of the things I wanted to do this was in the spirit of Talanoa, listen with respect to all views, talk and listen. And, you know, the thing that was really clear in California, and yes, they get 1,700 cases a day, but what has happened is they've accepted COVID is there and has to be lived with. You know, the elimination process was only ever going to work if the whole world accepted it, and it hasn't. So what I noticed in San Francisco and LA was that people were taking personal responsibility. Everyone wore masks. Everywhere you went, I washed my hands more in California than I have for a year in New Zealand, because everywhere you open a door and there was a sanitized thing beside it. Got on the lift, there was a sanitized. So it's a different approach that went, actually, let's take some personal responsibility here, because you have to do really silly things to catch it. Yeah. So I think it's worth looking back, you could see the fear in New Zealand. Up there, I didn't fear any at all. And I think we need to just broaden the conversation a little bit, because the world has moved on.
We barely even spoke about MIQ, which is the whole reason we initially got you on.
Well, here's my answer to MIQ. Well, from everything I've seen, we can get rid of it.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I love your opinionated stance on all of these topics, and I know our viewers will have some thoughts on it as well. Thank you so much for your time this morning. That is Sir Ian Taylor, the CEO of Animations Research Limited.
I'm Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, and this is a COVID-19 announcement. It's time to make summer unstoppable. Let's unite against COVID-19. Announcement. COVID-19 announcement.
Yeah, 2 shots for summer. Get your first one now and get your second ASAP. Cheer!
Human nature is imperfect. The wise and good man understands and admits this. Ultimately, many people see this time and this battle, so to speak, that we're living through in many different ways. But I personally see it as a spiritual battle. And I've come to see this and become more convinced of this as the years have gone on since I first started to be politically active in 2016. I've come to see that they are not just simply political and cultural, they are also deeply spiritual. I think that many of you have realized this also, that the only way out of this is through God.
If you couldn't go to school, if you couldn't go to work, if the government tightly controlled every aspect of your life, if everyone followed in blind obedience, if you had a restriction on where you could travel and very limited rights,